Hey everyone, welcome back to Shop Life. In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your fuel filter on your E46. So the E46 has a built-in fuel filter and pressure regulator. The pressure regulator actually has a vacuum line that comes out from it all the way going up to the intake boot. Depending on the model year, there are a couple of variations on where that line goes, but for the most part, most of the E46s that you're going to see are going to have that vacuum line hooked up to that F connector on the upper intake boot. So we're going to be replacing this fuel filter on this E46 wagon, but this process is the same for mostly all of the E46s. One main reason you want to replace this fuel filter is just like an oil filter, air filter, they all get dirty over time, so it is a good idea to replace them at a frequent interval. Fuel filter, usually a lot of people recommend doing around 60K, and depending on the type of gas that you're using and stuff like that, you might have to replace it sooner. Sometimes people forget to replace them at all. So the wagon that I have behind me has about 204,000 miles. I believe it has been replaced before, but I'm not exactly sure when it was done. So we're just gonna go and do it as a precaution, preventative maintenance. There's not really anything wrong with it, but sometimes if your fuel pressure regulator goes bad, you can have misfires, you can have vacuum leak codes, so system running lean. You can have various other codes as well because of the lack of fuel pressure if the filter is really clogged. But for the most part, this is more of a preventative thing. So sometimes you won't even notice the difference unless that vacuum line that attaches to that regulator is broken off. Let's go ahead and get to it and start removing this fuel filter. So here we are underneath the E46. Obviously I have it jacked up on the lift, so it makes it a lot easier for me to show you guys how to do this. But this DIY can be done by anybody as long as you have a jack and a pair of jack stands. You don't have to raise all four corners. Obviously it makes it easier because you have more space. So the fuel filter and pressure regulator are one assembly, like I said. So you want to keep the new one with you so that way you know the orientation of everything. So the one that we're using is made by Mall, or Molly, however you say it. The whole assembly is protected by this metal cover. The metal cover itself is held in with a couple of bolts and two nuts. It does make it easier to remove your metal reinforcement tray, but if you don't, you can still do it. So let's go ahead and remove the 8mm bolts. There's one right here, one right here, one on the top, and two nuts on the end of the actual tray itself. Alright, so once all the bolts and nuts are removed, you're gonna have to pull it off of the studs first, so pull it towards the transmission, and then you can drop it down. As you can see, there is a foam piece in here. Just see where it is, and if it does fall out, then just make sure you put it back where the same way it came. All right, so now you can see the fuel filter. Here's the vacuum line I was talking about. It's a good idea to replace this. You could just use any type of 3mm vacuum hose, and if you wanted to go even all out, you could put a silicone hose, that way you don't have to replace it again. Then we also have these hose clamps for the actual fuel delivery and the fuel return. So we have two hose clamps on this side that we'll have to remove, and one on the other side. So these hose clamps, if they've never been replaced before, it's a good idea to replace them just because they are a special type of hose clamp. Usually you can try to get a flathead in there. If a flathead doesn't work, you would have to use an open-ended wrench and just get on the side and undo it that way. So these have been replaced for us, so let's go and remove them. It's a good idea to have some kind of catch, drain pan or anything like that because you are going to drip some fuel. And I also recommend having the new filter ready to go, so as soon as you remove these two hoses, you can put that new filter on and also go ahead and put the other hose on the other side. That way you don't leak as much. So let's start off by undoing the hose clamps. And if you are replacing these hose clamps, make sure you get fuel hose clamps. They are a little bit different. They are different styles so that they don't damage the rubber hose itself. Slide the hose clamps towards the back. Now let's remove the one in the front. Next, we can remove the vacuum line. With that out of the way, the only thing that's holding this fuel filter up now is this 10mm nut for the bracket, and then you also have the hoses themselves. So let's remove the nut first. Then you can pull the bracket down. The bracket has these two hooks that attach onto the chassis. So just remove them off the hooks. Now you want to start pulling the lines off slowly. You can use some kind of prying tool to help you remove the hose. All right, so with those two starting to get removed, let's pry off the other side as well. Now get the new one. Make sure you have it in the right orientation. Make sure all the hoses slide in, then you can put the bracket back on. So you have to get it onto the two hooks, or get the two hooks onto the chassis, and then you can push it a little bit to get it onto the stud. Then refasten the 10mm nut. And if you were going to change your hose clamps, you should have done it before you put the lines back on, just because it's going to be a lot harder to put them on now. You would have to undo the hose clamp all the way and then wrap it around. Obviously, if you need to, you can still remove the hose again and put another clamp on. All right, so now we're just going to retighten the hose clamps. With everything secure, make sure the vacuum line's on properly. Make sure all the hose clamps are nice and tight. You don't want to tighten them too much so that you don't tear the actual rubber hose itself. And make sure if you are replacing the clamps, you do have fuel line clamps. All right, so now we can put the actual cover back on. Make sure that foam piece is in the right spot as well. Slide it into the studs first. Then you can fasten some of the bolts just to hold everything in place. And once again, these are all 8mm bolts and 8mm nuts. Now you can tighten all the bolts and nuts down. Once everything is resecured, if you have it on jack stands, I would recommend leaving it on jack stands, get it back into the car, put the car in ignition mode. What that does, it will prime the whole fuel system. So you'll hear the fuel pump cut on for like probably about 5 to 10 seconds, and you'll hear the whole fuel system get primed. When that starts happening, just get back underneath the car, double check all the hose clamps, make sure there's nothing leaking out. Obviously, if there is, you'll smell gas and you should be able to see it pouring out or leaking, dripping wherever it's coming out from. So once all that's done, then prime it a few times. You want to do it about 3 to 4 times. Make sure all the fuel is all the way through the system. That way, when you turn the car on, you don't have any misfires due to lack of fuel. Even if you do have a little bit, even after priming it, just turn it on, rev it a little bit, just so that way the fuel starts flowing all the way through. And if it does start misfiring, turn the car off, prime it again, and turn it back on, and you should be good to go. But anyways, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. If you need to get in touch with me, easiest way is to message me on Instagram at ShopLifeTV. Anyways, thank you guys. Hope this helps you out. See you guys in the next video.